Welcome to Fellowship 1-7, a biblical podcast from Child Evangelism Fellowship for the Christian community. On this podcast, we discuss various biblical topics, passages, and truths, and how those truths have impacted the lives of people around the world. I'm your host, Elizabeth Yoder. Today, we're meeting with Andy Bunn, and we're going to be learning a little bit more about how CEF reaches the children and families in the military through Military Children's Ministry, or as we call it here, MCM. So Andy, would you mind just introducing yourself and telling us about your role and history with CEF, and then ultimately how you got involved with MCM?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, for the opportunity to share all about what the Lord is doing through Military Children's Ministry. My role is liaison, connector. And basically, when we have local chapter leaders throughout the United States that have a military base in their area, they contact me if they have a desire to take ministry to the children there. I make a connection with the chaplain team to see if we can get together and begin a partnership. And from there, the partnership flourishes with the local chapter director and that team and the chaplain team at the base. I have been privileged to be a part of Military Children's Ministry for almost 3 years now. I started back on November 1st of 2021, and I have been in nonprofit evangelical ministry for almost 25 years.
That is awesome.
And the Lord led me to this role because I had met Fred Pry over about 20 years ago when he was a local director in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And when there was a need for this role, he and I had kept in touch over the years, and he remembered I had a little military background. So he called me and asked if I would pray about this opportunity. And my wife and I did, and it's been a great almost 3 years serving, meeting wonderful Child Evangelism Fellowship servants in the field, along with chaplains and their teams as well, who want to reach children with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
That is awesome. So you have a pretty special place for the military in your heart because you have served previously?
Yes, I do. And I, at one time, tried to be a military chaplain, but that didn't work out because I had prayed about serving my country and the Lord with a role, and that being a military chaplain. I didn't know I was waiting over 20 years to do that role by being able to minister to children of military families while serving the Lord in the capacity that I'm in with MCM. So it has been a wonderful journey, and the last 3 years have just been outstanding in seeing God work in the lives of children and military families.
That is awesome. So God was just preparing you ahead of time, way ahead of time. But I
Yes,
mean,
indeed. Yes, indeed.
oh, that is something that we've seen a lot when we've met with people on this podcast, is that God tends to prepare us in ways that we're not expecting
Absolutely.
for the
Yes, he
future,
does.
way in the future. So it's fun seeing that even today, because I mean, we've talked about Spurgeon and even Mr. O and how God was just getting them ready to serve. And I love seeing that still evident today. It's like God doesn't change, and he uses people in amazing ways, even if we feel like we're not qualified or prepared, or it's not in the role that we envisioned. It's so amazing
Absolutely.
how God works that out.
If he calls us, he equips us.
That is
Absolutely.
true. That is absolutely true. He is very good at that. All
Amen.
right, so let's get into a little bit of what is Military Children's Ministry. So you touched a little bit that it has to do with the military. Obviously, it's in the name. But what does that really look like for a
The
base?
only difference from traditional Child Evangelism Fellowship ministry is the audience that we're serving, and that is primarily children and military families. We still have good news clubs weekly, either at a chapel on base or if they have a school on base and we're able to get in that school, we serve that school. But we also have 5-day clubs. Right now, just this past week, we had our first ever 5-day club on McConnell Air Force Base out in Wichita, Kansas,
That is
and reached
awesome.
many children with the gospel there. And of course, we also lots of times leading into having a 5-day club or a good news club, we will start out with a party club and get the parents, the children all excited about God's word and having a party and talking about Jesus. And then it leads into a more traditional ministry of 5-day clubs and good news clubs. And
That's awesome.
so the other difference is the makeup of the team that serves. It's usually, of course, the local chapter director in that team. But for a team to work really well on a base, a lot of retirees live outside of military bases. And so having them apart so you have a consistency of the team long term makes a
Mhm.
difference. And then it is also made up of your traditional church members who are also going to be there long term. And then it helps to have military family members
Yeah.
just because of the familiarity the children have with their parents, other parents. The only issue with that is they're going to leave after 2 or 3 years and they're going to move to another base. And so we need to have a team that is made up of those three entities for consistency and familiarity and to continue the ministry long after a chaplain were to leave or any of the actual active duty military personnel.
Yeah, I was somewhat familiar with MCM and the personnel who would serve kids in that capacity, but I hadn't realized that there are retirees on base who also will serve in that way, and that's pretty special.
Retirees who love the Lord, they jump at these type of opportunities if they're made aware of them. Yes.
That's awesome. That is so cool. I love that because you see even that kind of mindset in your traditional church with, elderly adults coming alongside the kids ministry and wanting to mentor children or invest in them. My grandma, for the longest time, would bring gum, and that was her ministry to kids, is she would give them gum in church, but that's how she loved them. And kids always came to see Miss Mary and get a little piece of gum. It was what they looked forward to. So there is that unique connection between people of that age group and children just coming together, and God does beautiful things through it. That's
Amen.
that's neat. So CEF has this unique capability of seeing the need in different areas of life. So we saw a need in public schools with Good News Club. We saw a need in the summer with summer clubs, our 5-day clubs. When and how did we see the need for a military outreach?
Well, what's interesting about this is we've actually been serving children on military bases for decades, but it was based on a local chapter director who had a desire to serve that base, and they kind of coordinated themselves with the chaplain team to do something. And that would go very well, but then a chaplain team would leave or our local directors would change, and it kind of it didn't necessarily fizzle out, but it just didn't sustain itself over time. But back in 2006, and talking about someone who was called and had no understanding, equipping, or anything about the military, Georgine Bandera. She had been a local director out on the West Coast, and she was 60 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And she was speaking to a group of military kids, my understanding, and I'm actually going to put together a history, so I've got all this exactly down. But my
Yes, we
understanding,
contacted you at the right time.
she was going and speaking to a group that had some military kids involved, in my understanding, Washington State.
Mhm.
The chaplain for Fort Cavazos, Texas, which used to be Fort Hood, he was at that meeting. He walks up to her afterwards and he goes, "Ma'am, I need to do what you just did on my base, and I need you there right now." Georgine had no knowledge of military, had never really done anything with the military intentionally whatsoever. She just knew here she was at age 60 that she had been called to take ministry to children on a military base over in Texas. She rents or actually purchases, I think, an RV, drives from the West Coast, and stays at Fort Cavazos for about 2 years, ministering to children with the first intentional Good News Club in 2006, it becoming Military Children's Ministry, formerly at that time. Then she goes back to the West Coast to a base out in Washington State, ministers there for 2 or 3 years. And then she is called to go to Alaska. And
Oh,
she actually serves children in Alaska for several years. Georgine went to be with the Lord a couple of years ago, and I was privileged to contact some of those chaplains that she had connected with. And to the person, they all provided me quotes and information to share at her celebration of life. And so that's a long story to share that in 2006, MCM intentionally began with Georgine Bandera as the first MCM missionary. And the Lord has continued to provide for ministry on bases since then. And as I mentioned, we were doing it a little bit before that anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really neat. And I mean, you mentioned that the military is still serving on bases. So I think we already kind of covered this topic of what does MCM do, and primarily they serve in Good News Club and 5 Day Club and party clubs. Is there anything else that MCM does, or is it just?
Actually, yes. And I failed to mention that. But what we want to do, first and foremost, is be a partner to the chaplain and their team in serving children and their families. And so we get the opportunity to do our mission, but we also may come alongside them as partners in helping them with whatever ministries they have already in place to serve families. Just this summer, Janelle Stormer outside of Little Rock Air Force Base in Little Rock, Arkansas, she started a partnership by helping them first and foremost with their VPS. And she and a couple others attended that during the week and focused on partnering with them. And they are continuing to minister and setting up CEF types of ministry down the line at that base.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that it is almost first and foremost a family outreach because military families are very unique. I've not been on the inside. I've seen some friends on social media who are military families, and their situation is so unique and hard mentally and spiritually. And they always have a core group of people that they can connect with that reassure them, come alongside them when family members are out on deployment. Like that's key to reaching a military family, I think.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
That's awesome. So we have all of these ministries um, scattered throughout the states. Do you have any kind of statistics on how many Good News Clubs are established on these bases or anything like that?
I actually do. And I have a great story that just happened last week.
Sweet.
Military Children's Ministry was established to reach bases in the United States. It's a part of USA Ministries. And that works well because all the other bases in the world, they don't have the people outside the gates to volunteer and help out. And
Mhm.
so it's been focused on the US. And right now, we are on 21 bases in the United States. And we have two other bases using CEF materials that are with their ministries that are led by the chaplains on base. So a total of 23. But just last week, I made contact with our international ministries executive director because one of the ladies, one of the moms that is moving from the States to South Korea, wanted to know if there was anything we could do such that her children could have CEF on Camp Humphreys in South Korea.
Oh my
So right
goodness.
now, coordination is going on with our team out in South Korea when this lady and her family gets there to connect with them. And we are praying to actually start an international MCM club on Camp Humphreys, South Korea as soon as possible.
That is awesome. Oh my goodness. Praise God. Again, he does the unexpected as long as we're
Yes, he
faithful and
does.
following him. Oh my goodness. That is awesome. So this woman saw the importance of MCM and the
Yes.
impact that it's had on her kids. What kind of impact does it have on the community?
Well, actually, it brings them together. They, the military is a tight knit community anyway, because the mission is pretty much the same. You may be a part of different branches and different teams, but as a military community, the mission is always the same and you're brought together. What MCM does is provides an intentional outreach to children that is consistent, that they can count on week in and week out. And despite the fact that they're moving around every 2 to 3 years, mom and dad may be deployed at a moment's notice. The impact is a consistent focus of care with wonderful servants out in the field who just want to reach out and hug on a child and then share the gospel with them. And it gives them something to constantly look forward to. Because as we know, with traditional CEF ministry, the kids are going to mom and dad and wanting to know when they can get back next week because they love it so much. And kids are kids everywhere. And the same as with military children, looking forward to CEF week in and week out and all the folks involved with it.
That is awesome. I love that. And yeah, I think from an outside perspective, having somebody in that family, the military family, just on base, who can reach them with Jesus and help them know a little bit more about who he is, and one, that he's with them wherever they go. They don't have to leave Jesus back on this base when they move, that he is with them is so important to instill in the lives of kids. And I so appreciate you and all of those who come alongside you to share this ministry with kids. It is so important right now. You've shared a little bit about some testimonies that you have about MCM. Do you have anything else that you want to share testimony-wise with us?
Actually, you might not can see this. I don't know. And I know our listeners won't be able to, but I take this thank you card everywhere I go.
And it is a handmade thank you
It's
card.
a handmade thank you card from two little girls at Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Oh. And on the front page of the card, it says thank you. And then there's a heart with an arrow through it. And then it has their names on the front. You open the card up, and true to having been handmade by two little girls, you have to flip it over because it's upside down.
I love it.
Then you get on the inside, and it says, thank you for teaching us all about the Bible. I love when we get to learn something new. Now we are believers. Children describing themselves as believers. Yeah. That's amazing.
It is.
And so on this page at the bottom, after that, it has a cross. And then you go to the other page and has a Bible with a little girl at the front of a church in between the pews and the altar at the front. And then you go to the back. And once again, we have to flip it over. And it says, thank you, with a smiley face on the back. And you see, that's what we all get to be a part of at Child Evangelism Fellowship. And I am so privileged to be a part of it with Military Children's Ministry because we get to be a part of God's work of putting smiley faces on children. And there's nothing more enjoyable that I can think of than that.
Yeah, that is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is such a tangible thing to see of how God is moving in the lives of kids. And it's so unique and special, and it's just such a testimony. I love that. It doesn't have to be super huge, big blowout thing. They just believe.
It's just their hearts, and they're believers.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, that is such an amazing depiction of their hearts. And yeah, I would hold on to that card myself if I were in your shoes. That is pretty special. Unfortunately, we are out of time for our meeting today. Thank you so much for joining us. You've definitely enlightened me on this wonderful ministry. I had a little bit of understanding of what MCM was or is, but you've definitely given it depth, and I'm so appreciative of that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, anytime. If you would like to learn more about who CEF is and what we believe, you can visit cefonline.com/about. You can also learn more about Military Children's Ministry by visiting cefonline.com/MCM. This will also be linked in the show notes. Be sure to check out Unite Radio, where we unite kids with the gospel through adventures and foundational biblical truths. Give us a like and subscribe to keep up to date on both this podcast and our kids program. Thanks for listening.